Television uses two emotions to keep you interested. So what do? They either make you scared or angry. There are only two emotions to manipulate. The day that I'm told that I can no longer do what I need to do, I will leave, and I did. There's a difference between making a mistake and misrepresenting something. We have to now get the attention of our governments to stop doing what they're doing. And we're not doing it. It is not my job to speculate without proof. And today, if you picked up your phone and you ran a search, you will find every single big anchor on television ran that story. Not one of them have apologized.
Faye D'Souza is a journalist. And she's someone who teaches all of us how we can really citizen in the right way, how we can learn about the world around us and really be able to soak in everything that's happening around us and really act on it in the best possible way. She also became a mother recently. And all these things are part of what I'm talking to her about this week on Take a Pause. But before you go there, make sure you hit subscribe and smash that bell icon. Go straight into my chat with Faye. I'm happy you're doing a podcast which is not online, because the last time you and I spoke on a podcast,
Yes.
it was online. It was
the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah, 2020, 2021, maybe sometime back. Very different circumstance, but I'm happy we're doing this.
Yeah.
In
In fact, is this the first time we're meeting? No, we've met
in a non-public event. I think we only ended up meeting in
one
awards,
of those awards
conferences.
things. Yeah. I remember. Actually, that whole COVID, post-COVID has been a blur for me.
Yes.
I can't accurately remember what happened in which year.
Yeah.
It's just vague.
Do you feel that blur of the last 3-4 years, like I call it the before times and the after times, do you feel like you're a different person?
100%.
How so?
For many reasons. I mean, so for me, so a lot of things have happened. So for me, a lot of things have happened clubbed between 2019, 20, 21, 22. Like that. So 2019, I left television, which was like a really big deal for me. Right. And then I had like a couple of young people who also left and followed me, and they said, so we sat for a couple of months to figure out what we were going to do.
Yeah.
I had this whole idea of the kind of work I wanted to do and how we were going to design it. And then we started looking at offices. I started pitching decks to investors. And we just started working, and the pandemic hit us. Yeah. And there was no office, there was no investor, there was no nothing. We were all cooling our heels at home. And that's when we started to report the news from home. So we started doing that Just the News bulletin from the house. We started putting out information on Instagram. We started going out and reporting from like hospitals and slums and things like that about what's really happening in the first wave when, it was really crazy. And so that was all of 2020 and 2021. Towards the end of 2020, in the middle of 2021, I surprisingly found out I was going to have a baby, which was a pandemic miracle. And I had the baby in 2022. And so so technically I have not come out into the world at all since then. I've just been home. Yeah. So now I'm still working from home. Yeah. And we haven't gotten that office that we had decided to get in 2019. So it's just been a blur. And I mean, I'm a different person in so many, many, many ways.
What I've seen many people also, and I know that's happened to me, right? I call, for me, the shift was just the fundamental shift of why I do anything changed for me, right? Priorities changed. And I meet so many people who say that, we're all on that treadmill of where our career is going, what we're doing, all that stuff. And then we become one second, how are we living our lives? Is this how we want to live? Yeah. And would you say that at a fundamental level, is that a shift that you've seen around more?
I think two things have happened. And I think it's also one of the reasons why we're all a little more in conflict with ourselves. Because during the pandemic bit slapped us into realizing we're not spending enough time with our parents, which I realized a lot of people our age, the there were things being said about senior citizens in the pandemic that really scared the crap out of us, right? Because they were vulnerable, they were living alone, we couldn't reach them, we couldn't see them, it was scary. So I know that I became a lot more greedy about my time with my parents through the pandemic. We became more aware of how we were living at home. We were forced to spend more time with our partners than we had ever in the decade before. And maybe that brought many of us closer, some people not so much. But I think also what has happened is, as a result, we are now living our lives largely on social media. And that makes us it's a combination of being competitive and having a lot of FOMO, where when you're watching somebody else on social media, it seems like they're doing a lot, right? And you're left with this constant feeling that I'm not doing enough, right? And you're feeling like, oh God, oh, Varun has an office, I should also get one. If I don't get an office, then I'm not really doing this right. Because you're looking at social media and you are looking at the best parts of 400 people's lives that you're following on Instagram, and you feel like you know this person, but you can't see that person like slump on a Sunday and not do anything because they're not putting that out. But you're looking at a combination of these 200 people putting out their lives, and you think that you just never feel like you're doing enough, and you never feel that you're competitive or you're competing, and you feel inadequate all the time. So I think in a post-pandemic world, and I've heard a lot of people talk about this, a lot of us feel, on one hand, we're drawn to, I want to be able to give my parents more time, give my kids more time, give myself more time, live in a healthier way, live in a better way. But also, I constantly feel like I'm not doing enough work, or I'm not mattering enough. I'm not consequential enough. So I suppose in some way, that guilt, that sort of like conflict internally has also gotten a lot stronger. Do you feel that way?
I actually feel like it's collective trauma that we've decided to sweep under the carpet. Is that because they're constant questions I ask myself about every single thing which I do. I agree with you. Like, you're going through what everyone else is doing, and you think, okay, why am I not doing this? Why am I not doing that? You have to almost stop yourself from. So I went extremes. I went through a period of time when, for me, I didn't want to leave the house. I didn't want to meet anyone. Want to do anything possibly only online. Not even going up and down in the building. Right. I was become that far. It took a lot for me to get out of that, and then you suddenly start meeting people in person. It feels weird because one part of it almost reflexively, you know how it was, so you go back to that. But you also have this. I know there's a slight amount of like, you're not as comfortable maybe as you used to be. There's a slight barrier that's been built because we all try to build bubbles around ourselves. Right? I think the bubble is still there. It's just that it's gotten maybe a little, we don't notice it as much.
So the effort of actually stepping out of the house is like, it's colossal at this point, because you're constantly asking yourself, can I do this from home? Do I really need to go out?
Yeah.
So, and this is, I was never much of a party person. And I'm the kind of person who feels very happy when someone cancels a plan, because I can like put my jammies back on and, but I also feel very bad if nobody invites me.
Yeah, because you want to be included, but you want the ability to say no. I think that's the part. I agree with you entirely.
So I don't know. I feel that we're all different post pandemic, and I feel that the event industry is trying really desperately to get everybody
come
started
back for every conference, every event,
and I get it. I empathize with them, but dude, please.
But I've also seen a large set of people just really reflexively just go back to it. Just saying, I really want to be in person. I really want to every meeting in person. I want to go to conferences, do all of that stuff. We're seeing people travel because they're like, it's almost like starved of that, right? Just really get out there and travel. And I realized that like Pooja and I did that. Like, we literally, I think we did multiple trips the year we could. I think that was last year. Because we're like, we haven't done this and we got to take, and we also realized we had like a almost 5-year-old at that point, and now she's almost 6, who done like 1.5 years of school online, and she hadn't like experienced, like first time she experienced school was with masks and with distancing, and Although I don't think they'll remember most of it because now it's normal for all of them. But I just kind of think about that, and I feel the genuine. I mean, at the base level of it, I think how we live as human beings has kind of gotten into this out of whack scenario.
Yeah.
And I often start comparing how life for kids is now versus how it was when I was a kid. How was life for you when you were a kid?
Joe, first of all, I don't even know if it's fair to compare what life was like for us with kids today. For me, so I grew up in a family with 4 kids. We're 3 sisters and a younger brother. I'm sister number 3. So I'm that middle child that they really don't make anymore. Nobody makes those anymore. And so it was a packed house, right? There were a lot of us, but I found, there's a lot of comfort and confidence that comes from having multiple siblings, which is the first thing I realized that my child doesn't have, because my kid's an only child. But there's something about growing up with siblings and growing up in a loud house and, always having someone watch your back, even if you don't want them to. There's always someone there. I used to make fun of my sister because we went to the same school and then the same college, and I went to Mount Carmel College in Bangalore. And there was this one point, and there's 3 years gap between the 3 of us girls. There was this one point when my sister was doing her MBA, the oldest. The second one was doing her BSc. And I was in what we call, the 10th and the 11th and the 12th standard, pre-university, in the same college. We were all on the same campus. And so my sister could never bunk a class without me knowing. So I was like this chota constable, always available in her life.
Yeah.
And there was like a weird comfort to that the fact that we were always there.
Yeah.
It was a good place to grow up.
Yeah.
I only appreciate now as a parent and as an adult what kind of effort it would have taken for my parents to financially put us all through school and college, and to generally keep everybody safe and alive.
Yeah.
And fairly, and to raise what I call functioning members of society.
Yeah.
Which only as parents you realize is so tricky, because you're constantly asking yourself, oh my God, is my child going to turn into like a monster, a mean person, not kind person, a violent person? You're constantly worried about this stuff. But our parents had a sort of autopilot mode to all of this. They were very clear about, and my parents had like 2 or 3 things that they really drilled in. They were very clear about telling the truth about good and bad, and that was a non-negotiable. Being honest, working really hard, and walking it off. Tough love. They were very tough love kind of people. You dust yourself off, you walk it off, you try again, you start again, you get up. Tomorrow's another day. You don't give up. It was these were the sort of the pillars on which they raised us, and they raised us on a very clear family comes first. Philosophy, which I think that now when I look at us now with individual families and homes, I can see, fingerprints, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting point of just there's the entire fundamental part of a family unit and how that shapes all of us as we grow older. Because you realize only when you have a kid is that no parent is actually qualified to shape another human being. You're just winging it and you figure it out.
Yeah.
Every decision you take, and there's a standing joke which I have, which some parents take well, some parents don't. I'm like, no matter what you do, your kid will talk about you in therapy. right, which is my standard line, because there's no way you're escaping that. But I feel what's also interesting, I think we also grew up in a time when you were not worried about being judged as much. I feel now it's a constant process of anything. I mean,
you mean as parents we were not worried, or as children we were not worried?
Both. I feel the kids worry a lot more.
They do?
About being judged from a very early age.
Okay, so I mean, my child's not old enough to know that, so I'm learning from you then.
Yeah. I'm just, and I think that goes from kids to like, and you go like 12, 14, 16-year-olds and then upwards, and you're seeing that sense of, okay, my life is online, people seeing what I'm doing from a very early age, what I say, how, who I play with, just dynamics. I try to recollect sometime were dynamics the same way when I was a kid, because I was a weird mixture of a social kid if I was in a group, but I would need that time to myself to get my energy back. I was that mixture. I took energy from both. I needed both in a day. But now when I'm seeing the fact that it's not, I don't think you're ever really alone if you're a kid in today's world, because you always have something watching you, for lack of a less creepy line. Yeah. Were you shy as a kid?
I was not shy, but I was very quiet. I mean, I had these really big glasses from the first standard, and all I wanted to do was, find a corner and read a book. So I was not one of those kids that, you if you went to some auntie's house for dinner, for a party, all the kids would get around and start running. I was never in that. Like, the adult would have to, my mom would come looking for me when it was dinner time to see where I was sitting, because it would normally be behind one of the doors with a book. So I was not shy, but I was perhaps not very social either. I don't know why. I mean, I just vaguely remember being like that. But I think that also, and this I find true for parents and maybe also for young people and young children now, because of social media, you're sort of being compared with so much more. I mean, back in the day, you only compared your house with with a couple of relatives and a couple of neighbors. So they had a fridge that you didn't have, or they had a TV that you didn't have. Or as a child, even your parents would only compare you to your 3 friends that they knew and to your siblings or to your cousins. But now you're being compared to everybody in the world. So, and for me as a new mom, I found that really interesting, because you can just never do enough.
Yeah.
Because now, because of the internet, you're exposed to these women who are earth mothers, who are basically making everything from scratch for their children, right? Nothing is store-bought. Nothing has any preservatives in it. Nothing has any plastic in it. So there's that one extreme. And then there's the other extreme of, the people in your life where one set is asking you, why are you not the career woman you used to be? Why are you less than that? And on one hand, why are you not that earth mother? Why are you less than that? And on all levels, you feel that you're less in some way, because you're not, there's just too many things to sort of peg yourself against.
And it goes back to what you said earlier, right? Is that we all looking at what everybody else is at and saying, there is no way you're feeling like you are enough. You're just feeling like you're lesser than something which somebody else is doing or has.
Yeah. And it's really tough. I met someone who has a 1-year-old. I have a 1-year-old who said, I have no plastic toys in my house because I don't want my child to be mouthing plastic toys. And I was like, there is nothing but plastic toys in my house. And I was like, how do you fix that? Yeah. How? And what do you do when people give gifts and there's plastic in it? You give it back and say, I'm sorry, I'm going to take this gift that you went out and bought for my child. So you just wind up, and you feel like crap, because you're like, why didn't I think of this? Like, am I, allowing my child to put toxic plastic in his mouth? Is that the right thing to do? And on the other hand, there's my mom, who's raised 4 children, and this is her 3rd grandchild, and she's like, shut up. She's like, you're fine, aren't you? You turned out okay. It's going to be fine. So it's tricky.
Speaking of what you do professionally, because you mentioned that's a question that comes up. How did you choose what you were going to do in life?
So I was cruising. So it's through school, and I was that student who would only study 2 weeks before the exam. Even till today, I will not get onto something unless the deadline is in my face, because I'm a procrastinator extraordinaire. And then I was fairly good at maths. And my sister, the oldest, was a constant rank student who made the rest of us look like crap, and topped Bangalore University, which at that time is like a big, massive thing because it's everything from Bangalore till Mysore. When she did her BCom. And that's when I applied to Mount Carmel College, and they said, come. If you are Fiona's sister, you must be bright. They were very wrong. And they, they gave me admission in a very competitive portion of commerce, which was statistics, maths, commerce, and accounts, because you can score 100 out of 100 in 3 out of 4 of those things. Again, they were very wrong. And so I was studying these multiple forms of mathematics. And while I was fairly good at it, my heart was not in it. And I was in Mount Carmel, for which I will always be very, very grateful. And that was a college that had a lot of extracurricular noise happening, which I had never experienced before. So there were debates, and there were protests against the Narmada Dam that you could have discussions with as a regular student. You could take part in a bunch of different things. And I suddenly found myself wanting to do all these things. And the more you did stuff like this, the more aware you became about the issues around you and what life is like. And this was the time that Prannoy Roy was reading the news on television. And it was a wonderful time for news. N. Ram was writing in the Hindu. I mean, they were stalwarts, still active. Kushwant Singh was still writing at that time. They were, people were around who were really amazing. And at 18, I decided I wanted to be a journalist. I didn't think television at that time. I thought I would want to do print, or I really loved radio, but radio never did news in India. So I shifted, much to my mum's dismay, from this, after I finished my 12th standard, from commerce into arts. It's like,
that's a travesty, right?
It's a travesty.
The standard thing of there's science, there's commerce, and then there's, if you don't get anything, you get into arts. Yeah.
You get into arts. And it was also, what worse, in an all-girls college, which is where I was, it was considered that the girls who do arts are just there to kill time till they get married. That they're not really serious about achieving anything. Which was, I remember we did a street play called Hum BA Hai To Kya Hua Dilwale Hai. Because we were like, we need to fight for this respect. So I studied journalism.
Yeah.
Which again was like this random, nobody really did that course. But I just knew that I wanted to be a journalist. After I finished college, and I then went and did my master's in mass communication, I also read news on All India Radio part-time for 2 years. Which was really quite an experience, because they give you the sheet of paper and you have to read the news on All India Radio. It was really cool. And after that, I got a job with CNBC. As a reporter, as a producer for a bit, and then I shifted to reporting. And I reported on insurance as a beat.
So came back to commerce. Came back to one full circle. All the things you did came back to commerce.
So I reported on insurance for a whole year. Imagine having 365 things to say about insurance. But it was very cool.
But are there 365 things to say about commerce?
Yeah, of course. And it was, it was a beat that I got because nobody else wanted it. Because insurance it was really boring back then.
Do you find that funny? Is the fact that there are always beats that they give people who start, which nobody else wants.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you also gives you a lot of freedom, because nobody else seems to really bother about it as much.
Yeah. So I had, so my editors at that time drove us pretty hard, in the sense that you had to file something. Of course, half the time the stuff that you filed was not interesting enough to be carried, so it would just be dumped in the bin. But you had to file something. But what happened was, I found it fascinating, because insurance at that time was riddled with consumer complaints. People who would have health issues and their health insurance would not pay. People who had died and their life insurance had not paid. And so there were a lot of these issues in consumer court. And I would wind up spending a lot of time in consumer court, which a lot of people don't even know where it is in our city. Yeah. And it's this rundown, very sad place where people are fighting for insurance and somebody else is fighting, saying, I bought a fridge, but it's not cooling. It's a really fascinating place to spend time as a young person.
I didn't even know you could go to court for that.
You could go to
court. I have a fridge and it's not cooling, I can go to court for that?
Yeah, you can go to court for that.
Damn.
Yeah,
I might have some things I want to go to.
You might have some things you want to go to court for. And it's really a place where hope goes to die. Because these cases go on for a really long time. And I'm like, bhai, I will buy you a new fridge. But back then I was really young. I was a reporter. We used to take the train and we like walk. It's right outside BT station, incidentally. Consumer Court, if anybody's looking for it. And we would like sit and listen because you have to wait for the case that you are interested in to come up. So you're listening to a bunch of other things before that. And I think, much later when I started to lead a channel, that idea of what a consumer's rights are was the basis of my journalism. Because even today I feel, and nobody listens to me, but I feel that we are all consumers of government services because we pay taxes. And among the highest rates of tax anywhere in the world, especially if you live in big cities like Mumbai and Delhi and Bangalore. But look out of the window. Where is the service that you're paying for? Do you have clean air? Do you have clean water?
Nope.
Do you have basic safety? Can you tell your 10-year-old to go to school on her own tomorrow? No, you can't. You don't have basic safety. Yeah. Do you have free healthcare that's of any worth? No. Do you have free education that is of any worth? No. In any democratic country, developed country, every single citizen, the poorest citizen, should have all 5 of these things. In India, even the richest citizen doesn't have all 5 of these things.
Yeah.
So, when you pay 1,500 rupees bill on your cell phone and the service conks off, you pick up the phone, you call the call center and you expect someone to say, yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir, I will get it done immediately. Otherwise, you'll be like, what the hell is this service? Right? How much money do you pay to government on an annual basis and not demand service in return? Why do we drive around that gadda and say that, Arey yaar, this is only now the life that we are living? Why do we breathe poison? And our children, our babies are breathing poison for 6 months in a year. And we're like, this is only how it is. We can't drink the water out of the tap. Like, when your child is having a bath, if we gulp some of that water, you have to be terrified of what is in that water. It's poison. We pay, government hospitals are considered this place where you dump people who have no other choice. But you pay for that hospital. It's coming out of your pocket. It's coming out of the money you make by working hard every day. You pay for the government school. And we have no problem with the fact that it's crap. And you don't want to go there. And so when you need, you will go to a private school or a private hospital, pay through your nose. They will take advantage of the fact that there is so much demand and they will charge you whatever the hell they please. And the fact that we've not learnt this lesson after COVID really says something about us as people. And we continue to pay and we do not demand. Sorry, I just went off on one rant.
No. When you actually... I think the consumer thing is such an interesting thing, right? If you think about it, is that it's right. We all are... When we're consumers of so many things, we expect... I feel the problem happens. And one of the reasons I respect you a lot is that when you respond to any of these things, it's either let's not say anything or let's be aggressive about it. I feel there is there a place for nuance has always been my question, because at some point it needs to have it's an assertive conversation, it's not an aggressive conversation. But I feel that what happens oftentimes in this viewers, I mean, if you look at our world as WhatsApp groups and Twitter, there is either this is the spirit of Mumbai on one end, or on the other end there is extreme amount of aggression. Is there a way to actually, and I've always noticed that you always seem to find that balance in assertive perspective. You never veer towards aggression. I've been on panels with you where I could see aggression happening, but you would stick on that. Do you feel the answer is that? Is the answer to find that balance?
So as citizens, I mean, several things have happened.
Yeah.
This is the opinion that nobody gives. Several things have happened in the last decade to us as Indian citizens. We have entirely lost our freedom of expression. People are not going out on the street to protest anymore. The aggression is limited to closed doors where it is useless. having said that, and I needed to have said that, there is a lack of nuance in the sense that we don't really understand how our government functions. If you live in the city of Mumbai or Bangalore or Delhi or any of your cities, and there's a big hole in the road in front of you, a lot of times we need to take a minute to realize whose responsibility that road is. If it's a national highway, it's central government. If it's a state highway, and these are highways that run through your city.
Sometimes you'll have some panchayat come in between inside a city also.
Depends, yeah. If you're not urban, if you're in like Bangalore rural, then so this could be a state highway, this could be a BMC road, it could have been dug up by somebody. There needs to be a certain level of effort that gets put into understanding what makes our city run. A lot of times, most citizens don't understand it. They don't understand the jurisdiction. Like a lot of people in Mumbai don't realize that the Mumbai local belongs to the central government.
Yeah, railways, right? Yeah,
to the Railways Ministry. And actually neither the city government, which is your
BMC.
municipality, or your state government have any say over it. But it's only when we take an interest can we become more active citizens. And it's only when you are an active citizen will the guy on the other side, which is the government, all three levels, show you any respect. Because otherwise you are that consumer who happily pays a bill without checking what you're being billed for.
Why do you think we never learn how this equation works when we're in school? Because I think everyone talks about why didn't we not learn personal finance when we were in school. I'm like, why do we not learn how to? Because oftentimes you don't even know where to go for what.
Yeah,
you have to make a few phone calls, ask someone in your building, ask someone who might know. Did people ever know?
I don't know if people ever knew. And I think that maybe there's also like on personal finance, I believe that a lot of people in the industry on purpose make it seem complicated so that they can keep their jobs.
It's the words they use.
Yeah. Like the word that I hate most of all is EBITDA. My personal advice to everybody is if you have an investment advisor who comes to you and says the word EBITDA, fire him.
My favorite is anybody who's in the venture capital space and uses the word, the alpha and the beta for like just positive and negative. Just say positive or negative.
Just say positive and negative. And see, that's fine if you're in the VC world and you're dealing with people who should understand what you're saying.
But why alpha, negative? Just call it positive and negative.
Cool, yeah. But if you're coming to someone's house and saying, madam, do you want to invest in this? Iska EBITDA bahut acha hai. And then that madam is going to be like, oh, I don't understand anything. Let me just trust whatever this person is saying. And I think that's really unfair. But I think that also government makes itself very complicated just to alienate citizens so that citizens don't get involved that much. There are some people who get over-involved and it takes that kind of effort to... So, for example, one of the rules in our country is that if you're going to make a massive change that will impact the ecology, you have to get citizens involved and you have to have... you have to give citizens enough time to object. And they do it by putting this little ad in the corner of a newspaper and like leaving a certain number of days for people to write to an email ID. And then say, oh, nobody came, okay, bye-bye, and you move on. And then there are these really active citizens, these activists. Everybody hates the activists, but those are the guys who really take the trouble to figure out why is this coastal road a good thing or a bad thing? Should we be building it? Is it going to affect the fisher folk? Is it going to affect the fish? Is it going to affect the water coming into our city, going out of our city? But somehow we've reached a point where everybody terms activists as bad people, whereas they're the ones lifting the load that entire society should be doing. And the rest of us just simply don't care, as long as we can get through that day without it bothering us too much.
This point of not caring. I don't think I often think about is it an Indian thing? I don't think it's an Indian thing. I think it's there across the world. But
I don't know if that's necessarily true.
I find it to be a bit of a thing of a generational thing as well. I feel there was a generation who cared. Then there have been many generations who don't necessarily care. I call myself one of the generations who didn't really care. Just going. Yeah. But when I see someone who's younger today, I think there's a vast set of people who actually do care. I mean, they care about the climate. They care about...
But so here's the thing, right? And I could be I believe that our generation, those of us who sort of are in our early 40s, we screwed up a lot.
Yeah.
and we have a lot of answering to do for our kids.
Yeah.
Because it was under our watch that we let the environment go to shit. We let these pandemics
We like to
break out.
blame our parents' generation, but we actually
No,
do
we did
as
it.
much.
We did it. Because our parents actually, at least immediately, at least in India, our parents grew up there was no excess in their time.
Yeah.
Their clothes were made by the tailor down the street, and they would use it, and then their younger sibling would use it, and then their younger sibling would use it. And there was excess was not available to them. Even the rich didn't have what the average person has today. But in our generation, those of us who started working about 20 years ago, we've cared about nothing else but how much money we've made, and how big your house is, and how big your car is, and which building you live in, and whatever. We've not really put our time or our energy behind fighting for anything other than ourselves. And we're going to have to answer for that. Our kids are going to ask us what we did. And, we've also squandered those important 20 years of climate change that we could have reversed, but we didn't reverse, and now here we are. And climate change is now also at a point where recycling your garbage is not enough anymore. Right? We need to stop our governments from making shit decisions that they're making. Governments globally being run by boomers in their 70s. And climate change is not their problem, because boomers technically don't need to care about it. And so we have these younger kids who are like, climate change, but it's the adults of today who are going to have to do something about it. And what is that something? We have to now get the attention of our governments to stop doing what they're doing. And we're not doing it.
Because we're actually the first generation who, when we were growing up, saw this rise in access.
Yeah.
And as access increased, you suddenly had the opportunity to do so many things you could never do when you were a kid.
91 onwards, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, till what? And this will, if anybody watching this is from the 2000s onwards, in the late 80s, you would get like 2 channels, which is DD and DD Metro. And you would, for me, the highlight used to be Sunday evenings, you'd get MTV for 3 hours on DD Metro.
Yeah.
And then suddenly satellite came in. Then suddenly you had like, I still remember, it's one of my favorite stories to tell about just how much the choice thing has changed, is that when Coca-Cola came back to India, the place I'm from, Kakinada, there was one almost like a pawn shop kinds who actually would get supply of Coca-Cola. You'd only get like Pepsi and everything else. So it was a bit of a treat for me to kind of go there, have that bottle of Coca-Cola and come back home. And we went from that to suddenly having access to everything.
You grew up in Kakinada?
Yeah.
So cool. Nice.
And now we have so much of that, and we never satisfied.
Yeah.
Because we had scarcity, now we have excess of access. And we just stuck in just trying to make as much as we can from all the access that we have. But what I see so many people struggling with is generally don't feel like they have satisfaction, because maybe the core is there's no genuine purpose.
Maybe there's
just
no
making money.
Purpose. I mean, I was struck the other day, I was scrolling, and the number of ads that get flung at you to buy clothes. I mean, how many clothes do we need? Like this summer dress, that summer dress, this something. We're like, dude, boss, I'm fine. I have 2 pairs of jeans. Okay. But it's really, and this, somehow, there is this sense of, oh, there's this one thing I don't have. Oh, there's one thing I have to like. Somebody pointed out, again, on social media, somebody pointed out a really expensive watch that was on a celebrity's wrist for some 10 crore rupees. And I was like, it still tells time, right?
Yeah.
It's not, lining up space shuttles, is it?
Yeah.
It's telling time. But we just find more and more ways to spend ridiculous amounts of money. And we're all at our levels buying watches and phones and shoes and handbags with money that we shouldn't be spending. It's just like insane, because you always constantly feel like you need to make more money so you can spend more money, you can make more. It's just insane. And maybe that's why we're just never satisfied.
Yeah. And full disclosure, I am that person who will think about watches, talk about shoes. But for me, and that's what I often talk to people saying, that for me it's the curiosity of it. Like, I'm excited about a watch because I'm like, what's the story behind how that was made? Let me understand how that was done. Like the fact that you can, like, I went back to watches recent times, and this has become a thing I talk about way too much lately, because I realized that the fact that, just think about, there was a point when batteries kind of came in.
Yeah.
And now you have smartwatches, but the original automatic watches run.
The wind up.
Not even the automatic ones, which just run because of you just wearing them and moving your hand.
Yeah.
And it's just engineering with just gears and everything else. And I'm like, think of how many batteries you don't throw away, how much charging time you don't need, because just all went back to the things we actually had.
Yeah.
And I was sitting down and talking to my daughter about the other day, because she had a question, and she has a constant question about trash. Because she asked, like, will this plastic go to the oceans? Standard question all the time. She's a vegetarian by choice, because she said, I don't want to meat animals. She chose that at 3. I was talking to a friend of hers who's turning 9, who doesn't want gifts this birthday and wants everyone to donate it to Gunj. And I was like, I agree with you. I feel that is it going to be, I sometimes go down that dark hole, is it going to be too late?
I don't know, so it's interesting. I have a friend who's French and lives in Europe, who also has a 6-year-old who's just finished, I think, the first standard, the equivalent of the first standard. And she and her partner have shut down their house, given away all their stuff, kept only stuff that is sentimental in storage.
Yeah.
They have rented, an equivalent of an RV. And they're going to drive around Europe for a year while homeschooling their child, because A, they want to be able to spend that time together now the pandemic is over. They want to be able to see the world. And they also want to teach themselves to live in a more minimalistic way. So there are some parts of the world, and Europe is like this right now. They're living smaller and smaller lives because they've sort of maybe peaked on the consumerism and they're coming down the other end. So maybe, because we invited excess, so we got excess a little later than the rest of the world. Maybe we will peak a little later. Maybe the next generation will live in a more minimalistic way.
I often go back to something my grandfather used to tell me, right? And when I was growing up, he was always at, like, even he had the option, he would say the same tailor.
Yeah.
And I think the first time I did one of those larger public talks, I put up his photo and I said, this is something he taught me. He said, I know you'll start getting excess and you'll start getting stuff, but never forget that you need to focus on simple living and high thinking. It's the simpler you live, the more time you'll have to think and you'll do things. The more you complicate that, the more excess you add on to it. The less time you will actually have to think and to actually do something.
Yeah.
And I just went back home and came. So I was thinking about that when I was in his house. When he passed away about 10 plus years ago. And it keeps hitting me more and more about just generally how I also get an influx of information from across the world. And you think about how the world is, think about how your life is and how things are kind of going. But you have to not just take it in, you have to figure a way to put it out there in a way that is, has clarity and it's concise, and it's also kind of giving people almost like factual perspective and not just perspective, which is what you also get a lot of. How do you get yourself to that mindset? How do you pick the story to post, or at the basic level, but also like how do you communicate it?
So the fundamental, so a couple of things, right? So because the news that I put out on social media, and we'll put out on an app also very soon, is run by human beings. It's not algorithm driven in any way. So it's not about, this is really doing well, so we should do more of this. Or people really responded to So we're not looking at any of the numbers.
Yeah.
Because I honestly believe that views and interactions and likes on social media is the TRP of the internet.
Yeah.
And that
which
is the
what started
beginning of
problem
the
in-
end.
yeah.
Yes. So I still believe that news should be, it's sort of like your vegetables, right? You have to have it in order to be a functioning member of society. It's not meant to be entertaining. It's not meant to be fun. It's not meant to be like, it's just good for you.
Yeah.
So the filter that we put in is this information important for you to know? Do you need to know this? Do you need to know this simply to go about your day? Do you need to know this? So, for example, if there is a alert that it's going to, like, some sort of weather problem in Mumbai, and you need to know this information to simply go about your day. Do you need to know this information to be a functioning member of society? Which means tomorrow when you decide to go out and vote, do you need to know this? Yes, you need to know this. If it affects you in a science and technology, a climate, that sort of way. And then, of course, there are other things that we continue to include, like, for example, sports. So the information is meant to be the digital equivalent of skimming through your newspaper.
Yeah.
Where there's national news, there's international news, there's science and tech and climate change, and there is, there's sports. We're not very good at the sports. We're trying to get there, though. The idea also is to be able to strip out of it any opinion, any tilt in any way, any sort of emotion or color, which is why it's that color.
Yeah.
Because I came out of an industry in which I spent, 17 years, which manipulates emotion to keep attention.
Yeah.
Right? This is fundamentally what it does. Television uses two emotions to keep you interested. And they need to keep you interested because that is what TRP is. And, the longer you stay on that channel, the more money they make, fundamentally put. So what do? They either make you scared or angry. There are only two emotions to manipulate. So scared is this horrible thing has happened and tomorrow it will happen to you or to your loved one. The more I can get that crime to seem like it can happen to you, the louder it becomes. So, for example, so it's a terrible example, but it's a true example. A rape that happens in a city to a young woman who is going to college or going to work sounds like something that could happen to any of us. That is the one that will get amplified more than anything else. Because tomorrow it could happen to any of you. And then there is a lot of screaming and shouting of, you should be afraid, you should be afraid, you should be afraid. The other thing is anger, where basically you manipulate anger and you say, you should be angry about this, it should piss you off, it's angry. And the more angry you make someone, the more they will watch because they're hoping that you will give them a conclusion to that emotion, but there's no conclusion. You just rile up the anger for an hour and then leave that person to sleep in that sort of fluster.
And they kind of left with no outlet.
Yeah. At night before they go to bed.
Yeah.
It's a really unhealthy thing to do. For everybody involved, for the anchor, for the people in the studio, for the people in the PCR, for the journalists who are working on this, for the people who are watching it, for everybody. It's unhealthy for everybody. So what I had done when I left television, I actually sat down in a couple of restaurants that I like, but also at home with sheets of paper and drew out the things that I thought were problematic and listed out ways in which I wanted to be different going forward. And this was one of the ways that we will not use your emotions against you in any way. So I will not tell you whether what has happened is a good thing or a bad thing, how you should feel about it, what you should do about it. I believe that there is an intelligence in my audience to decide all these things for themselves. I will just tell you what has happened. That is my job. After this, you decide what you want to do. So we actually, if you look at the comment section, there will be people who say this is a good thing and there will be people who say this is a bad thing, happily coexisting next to each other. And I like the fact that we have found that middle ground where both of these sets of people are following this account. So it's not an echo chamber. We found that middle ground where people feel that, I can read this. And there is, there's a lot of harsh things that get said, and people are like, oh, why are you saying this? What about that? You didn't cover that. You didn't write about this. You didn't do this. You didn't give...
Whataboutism is a...
Yeah. And it gets pretty harsh, especially if you're working from home and you read all of it and you think that, it feels hard on many days. But then I go back to those sheets of paper of why we do what we do. And we don't always get it right. We make a lot of mistakes, but we try as far as possible to stick to that purpose.
You're just one of the few. I don't know if anybody else does actually apologizes when something is there was an error there. Nobody seems to do that.
They should, though. And this is an interesting thing. And so every time we put out, and whenever we apologize, I write it myself. Like nobody else on the team writes out that apology. I write the apology because I'm the editor. It's my responsibility. I have to apologize. And I always apologize as I made this mistake. And there's a reason why this needs to be done. And this is just journalistic practice. Journalism across the board is run by human beings. And human beings will make mistakes. It's part of who we are. Until such time as AI starts writing everything for us. But human beings will make mistakes. And it is your job as a publication or as a journalist to rectify that mistake. I mean, I could have put out a story that said that, Varun does this job, something, and he is in block number C, whatever. I cannot allow, which is an error, I cannot allow my audience to continue to believe that error. That is misinformation. I have to come out and say, hey, I said this. It was wrong. This is the truth. So that, it's less about owning up to the mistake. It's more about correcting that information so that the audience knows that, okay, that was wrong information. This is correct information. And that could be really small, or it could be really big, or it could be something that a lot of times people consider insignificant. Hey, it's okay. It doesn't matter. But I can't allow you to believe something wrong, to continue to believe something wrong. I have to correct that. And there's a difference between making a mistake and misrepresenting something, exaggerating the information, tilting something one way, wantedly leaving out details in a story to make people believe a certain thing, exaggerating some details to make a story more communal than it's really meant to be. Those are things that are happening right now in our media that are, journalistic sins. Those are not mistakes. Those are being done on purpose. Those are being done by people who know how to do better, but are doing it anyway. And one of the things that I want to hope to do is to restore some dignity into this profession, into the way we write our stories, the way we treat ourselves, the way we treat our audience, the respect we give to our audience's intelligence. That, if I've made a mistake and I come out tomorrow and say, hey, listen, I made the mistake. This is what it really is. Instead, we had said this. I apologize. My audience is intelligent enough to know that, hey, I understand that sometimes things go wrong. You're not going to write me off because of it. But we're not going to wantonly exaggerate and misrepresent and get you to feel things that you shouldn't be feeling.
Because also it's done to supposedly make people care, right? Because I feel that's the worry which many people have, is that if I don't do this, people won't care and maybe they won't consume my content. But that's not the reason why you're doing it in the first place. You're doing it to inform, and like going back to being informed citizens are only when you are informed.
Yeah.
Not almost like given content for you to kind of move towards a certain direction of thought.
Yeah, so I want to give you an example. I'll give you I use this example, this is a not political example as well, right? So it's not about the politics, and that's a separate conversation on what politics has done to the media. But this is a pure TRP game. And I was still on television when we heard at night that the actress Sridevi had passed away. The news came in the middle of the night. And then through the whole day, the next day, there was this whole was she murdered? Who had murdered her? Was it her husband? It was really messy.
She's in a tub and I don't know.
Yes. And everybody did it. Yeah. Everybody did it. Even the ones now who pretend to be like, oh, we didn't do it. Everybody did it. And I had not done it because I had asked a local reporter in Dubai to go to the hospital in question where the postmortem was done and to get us the report. And the report simply said, and I remember it like it was yesterday, it said, death by drowning. That was it. That's all it said. There was no evidence of foul play. There was no evidence of any sort of crime that had been committed. And there were people in my newsroom who said, oh, no, but everybody's doing the story. And I said, but we have no proof. What are we going to do? We can't. I mean, either we're slower than everybody else and they all know something we don't know, but I have no proof in my hand. And so we're not going to run this story. And what we did instead at 9 o'clock that night is we ran a tribute to her. We called up people who knew her, who talked about what she was like and what her career was like, and we ran a tribute. And I remember speaking to someone in my newsroom who at that point, in retrospect, I should have fired, who then turned around and said, but what if tomorrow it turns out that she had been murdered? Then you'll be like left with egg on your face. And I was like, I will report it then. When that information comes out. But it is not my job to speculate without proof. I mean, it's okay for you to do it at your chai ki tapri when you're having your smoke with your friends. It's okay for you to do it at your dinner table. But it's not okay for journalists to do it without proof. It's not okay to sit around and run like a little kangaroo court where everybody's speculating, aisa hua hoga, aisa hua. You have no proof. And all of these guys did it. And it has been, 3 years now?
Yeah.
No proof has emerged, Varun. At all. Nobody has apologized. Not one. And today, if you picked up your phone and you ran a search, you will find every single big anchor on television ran that story. Not one of them have apologized to her family, to her legacy. This was an individual who had worked from the time she was a child.
Yeah.
Her legacy was tarnished that day, on a day that people should have just been paying their respects. For what? For one night's TRPs. One night. That's it. There was nothing else to gain from that. One night's TRPs. That is how, unethical and devoid of morals that industry has become. I mean, we should not, when I say Sridevi today, we should be thinking Hawa Hawaii, we should be thinking Mr. India, we should be thinking of Chandini, all of the wonderful things that she did. She was par excellence, English. It was amazing work. But we're thinking bathtub. And we can't erase that from our minds.
Yeah.
Who is going to apologize? Where is the accountability for the fact that you went out and did whatever the hell you wanted without any proof at all? And I saw the TRPs that night. My TRP that night was 0. Nobody watched what I did, and that is fine because we didn't do the exciting stuff. Yeah. But who is going to apologize for the wrong that was done? And one of the reasons why I put out those apologies is because I want the Indian audience to ask, how come nobody else apologizes?
Yeah.
Right? It's important for you to realize that you're being lied to and nobody's taking any accountability for it.
And accountability is something which has to come from either you or the system that you're a part of. It's not something which people necessarily want to do. I feel it needs to become something that is either ingrained. Like I go back to the earlier part you said about speak the truth is what, which you learned as a kid. It comes from either that or the organization you work for pushes you for that. Or inherently, that's the way society is functioning. It's functioning with accountability as a key metric. It's not about... Because most people fear accountability. We want to say and do things, but not necessarily be held accountable to it, right? It's like that person who makes that Twitter account but doesn't put their photo on it. And I feel the more the internet has spread, the less accountable... It's two things, right? One is either you're too accountable because you worry about everything that you say and do is out there for the world to see and judge. On the other end, you want to not be accountable at all because once again, at least there's some place where I'm not being watched. And some in the midst of all of this, we've just lost that as a core thread of I think what it is to be human is to be accountable. What do you tell a young journalist who wants to... a lot of them are... I know you get asked this a lot. I have to ask this question. Because I've had friends who've left and have gone to like corporate communications or moved publications, and every person I've spoken to, because I went to media school and I've seen so many of people who studied with me all move away from the profession, and the only thing I hear is just disillusioned. And I know they all got into. There's a standing joke in anybody in media school is that there's a big chunk of people who take up journalism who generally have this thing. But one second, I'm doing this for like you guys are just doing this like. I was doing it to get into MTV. That's all I wanted. So I was in audiovisual production.
Yeah, there's a chip on the shoulder. Yeah.
But I've had friends who like, I'm doing this because I genuinely believe this is my purpose. This is why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it for, for the money or any of the other things. And I've seen them all slowly over the years go into a mode and also made the audience get disillusioned, right? You don't necessarily believe what you see.
Yeah.
You look at it almost like it's entertainment and you just move ahead.
That's so sad.
Yeah. Is there a balance to it? Is there?
It's really, really difficult right now for new journalists, for young journalists. I mean, I remember when we were young and we told someone that, oh, this is what I do, people would be like, oh, wow. Nobody's impressed anymore when you're a journalist. And that's so sad. Because you genuinely have to believe that you can change the world before you put your pants on in the morning. Otherwise, it's a tough job to do. Journalists are normally used to be really arrogant people because you're out to change the world. Because you believe that you do your job for the greater good. Because when you do your job for the greater good and what I call journalism throwing stones at giants. Because when you're throwing stones at giants, your nose better be clean. Right? Which means no brashtachar on your end, no income tax fraud, no like this way or that way, no gray area at all. Like you can't do anything. And that's why you would have a chip on your shoulder saying, I'm here changing the world while the rest of you are just, working for corporate greed. Things are different now, obviously, because the media has become corporate greed and they're self-serving. And they're not out for the greater good. But there are a lot of journalists still holding out, still doing good work. It's not dead entirely. There is, in my head, I can see it. There is a tapestry, a carpet across India of independent journalists doing honest work in pockets. There are people who report 100% on the Dalit community across the world. Dalit Desk is amazing. You should follow them on Instagram. You should help them out. There are people who work on tribal communities. There are, there's Pari, which reports on rural communities. There are those that report entirely on women. There are those that report in different languages. I write for young people. There are other people who only write about the South. There are those who write in the Northeast. So it exists. It's there. My advice for someone who wants to get into journalism is you need necessarily believe. You have to believe that you can change the world. And don't let anybody tell you that you can't change the world, because you can. You need to choose your first job based on the editor that you are going to work with and not the name and the brand and the salary. Because if you work with a bad editor, that is where the disillusionment will come from. If you work with a bad brand, if you work with a bad channel or a bad newspaper, you will be disillusioned and you will give up journalism altogether. You need to work with an editor who believes that you are changing the world. And then it is not journalism school, but it is your first couple of editors who will instill in you the pride of being a journalist, your ethics, which are really important. And I'll tell you why ethics in journalism are really important. And it is that will take you through your career. And I believe that journalism across the world is going through a bad phase. Because there's an onslaught from social media, there is an onslaught from YouTube influencers who are pretending to be journalists and are saying whatever the hell they want to. And they don't have that background of what journalists are supposed to sound like and why they use words like accused and allegedly and what the laws and the rules say. But I believe that the profession will survive because it has to. If democracy will survive, then journalism has to survive. It's a phase. I think.
How do you keep your almost because mindset almost balance through it all, because what you do has highs and lows in the mind, unlike very few other professions.
I have a therapist and a dog.
Huh.
So it's hard.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend it's not hard, because on one hand you need to figure out how to run it as a business, because you have to pay salaries and you have young people working for you. So their growth, their careers, and it's not just about, okay, I've paid your salaries, now everybody shut up, but you need to be able to grow so they can also grow. So there is there's a purpose for them to be there. So on one hand, there's the idea of it needs to be a business, it needs to move, it needs to come up with ideas, you have to execute those ideas, you have to make a profit to some extent. On the other hand, you have to keep all of the ethics and the integrity in place. On the third hand, you have to handle all the hate that comes, and there's a lot of hate that comes, the fear of the ED or raids, or having to pay for lawyers to get you out of jail. There's all of that. And, every time, and I mean, if you're going to be completely honest about the fact, the shrinking freedom of expression that we have, where today filmmakers, advertisers, just random uncles are afraid of saying anything because they're afraid of getting themselves or their families or their businesses into trouble, you also then have family to worry about. Because as soon as you do something, everybody's like, hey, you have a child, you have this, you need to be careful. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And so there's all of these things that have to happen at the same time. And I think that it's important to realize that, or at least what I do is, I tell myself that it's not important to be the biggest and to do everything today. But if this much that we have done, or this much that I have done today, has been done honestly and with integrity, then it's fine. Then I'll survive another day to be able to try again tomorrow. But the minute that I lose the honesty and integrity, there's no point trying tomorrow. Right? Because that's what we're here for. And that's what happened in television as well. Everybody used to ask me, so how are you holding out? And I said, the day that it stops being honest, the day that I'm told that I can no longer do what I need to do, I will leave, and I did. So I still hold that. So it's okay. I tell myself that it's okay on a day when we don't do too much work, where we just put like 2 posts. But as long as that was done with integrity, it's okay.
When do you have a point where someone gave you a piece of advice when you really needed it, and what was that?
So there is a former cop, former Mumbai police commissioner, D. Shivanandan, who I've interviewed a couple of times. I think he's very cool. He took on the underworld back in the day, and so I meet him on a regular basis for advice. And he once said to me, and I know this is from the Gita as well, but he sort of put it into perspective, and he said, you need to show up every day and do your duty like a constable, and not be attached to the outcome. Which is also what Bhagavan Krishna said to Arjun, right? And he said, the constable's job is to come in every day and stand at that street corner and do what he needs to do. And he's not in charge of the universe. So you need to, if your duty, and he used the word duty, right? Cops say duty karo. Yeah. So he said, if your duty is to be a journalist, you come in and you do your journalism. You cannot say that, nothing's changing. I've not managed to it's just going from bad to worse, and this environment is so bad. And he said that you're not responsible for all of that. You're just responsible for your journalism. You come and do and you go now. Yeah. You do your 12 hours of duty. Duty maro, ghar jao. Do it well, but those 12 hours. And I think that really helps in many ways, because then you can sort of disconnect from the bigger things and say, okay, that's not my responsibility. It's not my responsibility to, make the earth go around the sun. I just have to come and do this much. I did it. Now I'm going, bus. Thank you. Now I'll spend time with my kid. Now I'll play with my dog. Now I'll go for a walk. I'll do the things that I need to do, because duty mara maine. I've done my work. So I'm good. Yeah.
And I can keep going on. But as I always say on the show, we always like to leave enough for a part 2 and a part 3 and many other parts to this. And thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been amazing.
It was my pleasure as well. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you.